Howdy!
Howdy!
All right, woke you up, didn't I? Okay, today it's my pleasure to introduce Bob Inglis. He's a former U.S. representative, served in the Congress for 12 years, South Carolina's 4th District. At the time, he was not necessarily concerned about global warming, but he was presented with so much information as a representative that he started thinking things a different way. And so after he left the Senate, he started an institute called the Energy and Environment Initiative. So give him a warm Aggie welcome.
Well, thank you, Mark. It's wonderful to be here. I broke some land speed records getting here, and so what beautiful territory. Anybody? I guess how many people live within, say, 100 miles of here? So this is home for you, huh? It's beautiful territory. I'm from South Carolina. You know, directions in Texas would encompass the entire state of South Carolina. So, you know, go to the end of the ranch, and then, well, that might be the end of our state. So I'm getting used to this big Texas thing. So, and I'm here with a big idea that I hope that maybe sounds familiar. But before I want to do a little sampling. Mark told me about sampling some in a class or a lecture that he does. So let me try this. How many here would say they're inclined to think that climate change is? Well, let's do it a couple different ways. I'm going to give you 3 different options. Climate change is hooey, or silly, just nonsense. Climate change is real, but don't know why. Climate change is real and human caused. So let's just try it, see where we end up on those. And we should do this as by secret ballot. Everybody close their eyes. No, you don't have to do it. But how many think that climate change is real and human caused? How many would say it's real but not sure why, what the cause of it is? And how many would say, you know, really there's a bunch of hooey? Nobody in hooey? Shucks, I was hoping to get some converts here. So, you know, but it's great to, okay, so it was predominantly people that believe, as I now do, that it's real and human cause. But I will tell you, I didn't always think that way, as you just heard. I was in Congress for 6 years, pretty much as a bomb thrower the first 6 years. I came from the reddest district in the reddest state. Anybody want to fight me for that distinction? Maybe you think that your district, your home district, is the reddest in the reddest state, the reddest district, the reddest nation. But my district's pretty red. All right, it's Greenville, Spartanburg, South Carolina. So it used to be one of the 6. Now we've got 7. We're like you, people who keep on coming our way to come join us in South Carolina. I don't think they're joining us quite as rapidly as they're joining you here in Texas. But so we picked up a 7th seat recently. But the district that I represented was Greenville, Spartanburg. So it's the South Carolina's a triangle, you know, and there are 2 points on the ocean and 1 point inland. We're that inland point of the triangle, the inland side of that. So. A pretty conservative place, and I'm here to tell you that I'm a pretty conservative fella. You know, I mean, 93 American Conservative Union rating. You know, is that an A here at Texas A&M? By the way, that's an A, right? 93 is an A. Is it a low A? It's an A though. It's still an A, right? It's a good A. All right, good. He's a nice professor. He says it's a good A. See, so. 100% Christian Coalition, 100% National Right to Life, A with the NRA, 0 with the ADA, Americans for Democratic Action, and 23 by some mistake with the AFL-CIO. I was really hoping for a 0. And so pretty conservative guy, right? Throughout, those, by the way, are my rankings throughout the 12 years that I ultimately spent in Congress. So I was there for 6 years, beginning in 1992. In 98, I ran for the Senate. Note to self, do not challenge 32-year incumbent U.S. Senator in 70% right track territory. You can get some practical political advice here today if you're thinking about running for Congress. All you got to do, if you're thinking about challenging a member of Congress or a senator is don't spend any money in polling. Just go get the Wall Street Journal and see the most recent national poll that the first question will be, generally speaking, would you say we're on the right track or wrong track in this country? Well, when I won in 92 against an incumbent, it was 70% wrong track. When I lost against in a challenge race in 1998 against a 32-year incumbent, it was 70% right track. So that should determine whether you make your race against an incumbent. Is that first question of the Wall Street Journal poll? I lost that Senate race, and I was out 6 years doing commercial real estate law again in Greenville, South Carolina. And then I ran again in 2004. And got 6 years. I thought it'd be longer than 6. I'll tell you why that was in a minute, but I thought it'd be longer than 6. But in the first 6 years of Congress, I said that climate change was hooey. I would definitely have aggressively raised my hand to that question about it being hooey. In fact, we had a great press conference one time pillaring Al Gore. He was proposing a BTU tax, so we set up a press conference in downtown Greenville, sort of inner city Greenville, had some sacks of coal, some wood, firewood, and I said, Al Gore wants to raise these poor people's heating bills. Not that a lot of people in Greenville, South Carolina heat with coal, you understand, but still, the point was there. And so I said, see, he wants to raise their heating bills, vote Republican. It was a great press conference, really, and got some nice headlines and made some hay with it. And so, but in the 6 years I was out, the first of 3 steps occurred for me in this metamorphosis. The first was my son, our oldest child, came to me when I was running again in 04, and he said to me, he just turned 18, he's voting for the first time. He said, Dad, I'll vote for you, but you're going to clean up your act on the environment. And so his 4 sisters, all of them younger than he is, agreed. His mother agreed. So these people could change the locks on the doors. And I had a new constituency that I needed to respond to, right? And so I got with it from that perspective. Second step for me was getting on the science committee, going to Antarctica. Here's another practical bit of advice. You can go to Antarctica. There are 2 ways to get there. One is to be a scientist or work for a scientist. That's the really hard way. You got to be smart and scientific, like your professors. The other way to do it is to be a contractor down there, and you can get a job in Antarctica for the season. Here's another practical piece of political advice. If you're going to go traveling in when you get elected to Congress, nobody will complain if you go to Antarctica. In fact, they will think that something has gone wrong in your head. Because what in the world were you thinking going to Antarctica? Who wants to go there? But don't go to any place. If your district is cold and you go to a place that has white sandy beaches and warm water, that will get you in trouble. But that's called a junket. But nobody called it a junket to go to Antarctica because it's white, but it's not warm there. And so I saw the evidence in the ice core drillings in Antarctica. Basically, at the South Pole, it's 10,000 feet above sea level. They say their ski conditions at the South Pole are a mile of ice and a couple inches of powder. It's a desert at the South Pole. They get 1/4 of an inch of precipitation a year. And so it's 10,000 feet above sea level, so it's a mile of dirt, and then there's a mile of ice. And in that ice, we drill down through it and pull up these samples and check the CO2 levels in the samples. And what you find is stability, and then coinciding with the Industrial Revolution, an uptick in trapped CO2 in the ice. I'm not a scientist. I just said as a commercial real estate lawyer, but I think I can understand this, though. When I was burning trees this past weekend at my house in South Carolina, no big deal, right? Those trees were grown near us. They were sinking CO2 as part of their life process. I burned them, released the CO2, same epoch, same time period. But if I go deep into the earth and pull up trees and vegetation, animals, been gone for a long time, time and temperature and pressure turn them into fossil fuels, I pull them up and I burn them, I'm pretty clearly changing the chemistry of the air. And the physics of light are such that light enters, but radiant heat doesn't escape. All of it doesn't escape. Thank goodness. If it did, we'd be freezing to death. So we've got this blanket of greenhouse gases. And this is what I learned in Antarctica and came pretty convinced of the science there. Science committee used to go every other year. I'm not sure they're still doing that, to visit with the money, basically, because we spend about $340 million a year on the U.S. polar programs. So the idea is to go down there and make sure, they're not just whooping it up, that they're actually doing some scientific work. So that was the second step for me. Third and final step in my metamorphosis was really sort of a spiritual epiphany for me. I had an opportunity to go again with the science committee to see coral bleaching at the Great Barrier Reef. And I met an Aussie climate scientist who was showing me things. As we'd go down, he'd point things, and then he'd come back to the surface. And in his eyes and in his voice and the excitement that he had, I could tell that he was worshiping the God of creation, not the creation, but the God in the creation. And later, with words, we found out, yes, indeed, we did share this worldview. And Scott was very inspiring to me because he was willing to change his life, to make conservation changes to his life in order to love God and love people. And so I got real inspired by that. Came home and introduced the Raise Wages, Cut Carbon Act of 2009. Another note to self. Do not introduce carbon tax in the midst of Great Recession. Probably won't go too well in the reddest district of the reddest state. But I had voted against cap and trade because I think it's hopelessly complicated, embarrassing in the free allocations of the well-connected, decimates American manufacturing, and a pretty substantial tax increase. So for all those reasons, I voted against cap and trade. And I have this notion that if you're going to oppose, you need to propose something as a substitute. So I proposed this carbon tax. And as I said, it didn't go too well. I'd committed some other heresies that got me in trouble with my political right. I mean, as I just identified in those rankings I just gave you, I'm pretty right-wing, right? But there is some territory, real estate to my right. So, I'd committed some other heresies that created some space. I voted for TARP. That's the Troubled Asset Relief Program. That'll never be forgiven by the Tea Party. I've been for comprehensive immigration reform. That may be turning. I may ask for a recount on that one. I hope it's turning. I voted against a troop surge because I had conservative concerns that my friend, it really is the only president who's ever known my name, George W. Bush, was doing nation building in Iraq. I was concerned about that. And that now apparently is a dominant position of the Republican Party based on the Syria votes. The intervention in Syria, the lack of intervention there. Apparently that is now the dominant position of the Republican Party. So I do want to recount on that one. But the main heresy that I committed was just saying climate change is real, and let's do something about it. And so you can see in my political life a measurement of action on energy and climate. Because when I went back to Congress in 2004, Republicans and Democrats were talking about action on energy and climate. And it wasn't identified as a tribal marking, right? You could be a Republican and be for action on energy and climate, and it wouldn't cause you to have this real estate to your right that would cause you to get primaried and lose. And people on the left could be opposed to action. In other words, it wasn't marked as a political or a tribal identification. And so in that race, I announced to the district that I was going to do something different. That my first 6 years, I said, really, I wasn't too focused. I've been out 6 years, so I said, now listen, if you send me back to Congress, I'm going to be singularly focused on energy security. And so apparently it was all right with them because I got 85% of the vote in the Republican primary. Against two opponents, one of them was credible. The other one, not so much. Fun guy to talk to, but not so much credibility. But they split 15%, I got 85%, right? Sounds like a brag until you hear the rest of the story. Then it went downhill a little bit in 06. 08 is getting sort of bad, you know, but the economy was holding up until 08. And then came 08 and the financial collapse in the fall of 08. And by then, it had become culturally marked. And I'd ask you to consider, for example, Newt Gingrich at the beginning of 08 was on the couch with Nancy Pelosi. You might have seen the commercial that he cut with Nancy Pelosi where he's literally sitting on a couch and they're talking about action. And we don't always agree, do we, Newt? No, we don't, Nancy. But, you know, that's the way the commercial goes. That's early 08. Financial collapse comes. By the end of 08, Newt is anything if not nimble. By the end of 08, Newt is saying, drill here, drill now, pay less. And he's doubting whether climate change is human-caused. Amazing that this happened all within the space of a year, right? And so came the 10 cycle, and we knew we would be in trouble. It was hard. It was going to be hard. And I knew what I needed to do, which is basically say, ain't it so bad? You know, we're done for, China's beaten us, we're through, all that kind of stuff. But I couldn't do it because I don't believe that. And, you know, so we had a slogan to show you how out of touch we were. We had a slogan that was basically recycled Ronald Reagan. Reagan was Morning in America. Our slogan in 10, if you can believe it, in the teeth of the Great Recession was, America's sun is still rising, which I believe then, believe now. But it just probably wasn't a good time to be telling people that were mad that their sun was still rising. They wanted to hear, things are miserable. And I'm miserable, aren't you? And let's make our enemies even more miserable than us so that our misery is a little bit less than theirs. And so we had quite the wrong affect for that race and ended up getting only 29% of the vote. So, having been tossed out of Congress and declared a heretic, I figure you may as well parade right down Main Street and declare that you're a heretic, right? That just say that, yes, this is actually totally consistent with conservative thought and people who believe in markets and free enterprise. Is let's make it so that there's a true cost comparison between the fuels. And so I gave you all that background about me. Now I'll give you a little bit of policy. Then I'm going to open up to your questions and comments and tell me how to get this done. Because it really is a lot about folks like you that have spread the word that's going to make this happen. So the policy that I'm talking about is this true cost comparison. It's basically, what if we take away all the subsidies? Now, if you're planning on a career in wind, you just sort of went, gulp. What did he just say? Wind doesn't exist without production tax credit. You're planning on a career with electric car companies. Oh, that's a $7,500 credit. Oh, well, that won't last if Inglis gets his way. But let me ask you to consider this. Perhaps the biggest subsidy of all is being able to dump in the trash dump of the sky without any cost attached to it. And if you actually make people have a tipping fee attached to dumping in that trash dump, perhaps things change. And maybe wind becomes competitive on its own without the production tax credit, particularly here in places in Texas, it's very competitive, because you've got a true cost comparison between the fuels. You're just saying that internalize all, you're taking economics, internalize all the negative externalities, the hidden cost, reveal those, put them on the product, and have coal-fired electricity compete head-on with other forms of electricity, for example. Now, this causes coal to say that we're in a war on coal, and I'm sure they think that I'm part of the war that they perceive about the commodity. But it's really not a war on coal. It's just saying, be even biblically accountable. Hold your stuff on your property. You can't do on your property something to harm somebody else's property. So be accountable and hold your stuff there. And then coal. Now that all your costs are in, what's your price per kilowatt hour again? Oh, right now, you see, coal-fired electricity is so cheap in South Carolina, I can't even tell you how much it is. But unless Milton Friedman was wrong in the title of his book in 1975, you know, he's one of the patron saints of us conservatives. One is Ronald Reagan, the other that we bow to. The other is Milton Friedman, right? So Milton Friedman's title of his 1975 book was "There's No Such Thing as a Free Lunch." And the reality is that's really true. I'm paying the full cost of coal-fired electricity in South Carolina right now, just not at the meter. I pay through an opaque healthcare system right now because right now somebody, Mrs. Jones, is going to the Greenville Hospital system with lung trouble from the small particulates from coal-fired electrical plants. And so if she's on Blue Cross Blue Shield, well, my premium just went up because we're covering Mrs. Jones. That's who covers me. Maybe she's like my dad, a 90-year-old person. If so, she's on Medicare. Everybody in the room is paying. If you got a job, you're paying Medicare taxes. You're paying for my dad and Mrs. Jones. Maybe she's poor and she's got Medicaid. You're paying through general taxes. Or maybe she has nothing and we're paying through cost shift. And it's shifted on those three other accounts when she goes to the hospital in Greenville, right? We're paying, just not paying at the meter. And so this is where, I'm a Republican, not a Libertarian. There used to be a difference, but now it's sort of all the same, but for a while. So if you're a Libertarian here, let me ask you, isn't this something you passionately believe, that markets should be transparent and that all the costs should be in and that everybody should be paying the full freight for what they get, that there shouldn't be free riders and there shouldn't be really public goods. You got to pay for what you get. Well, that's definitely the case when it comes to this thing about hiding the costs through a healthcare system rather than putting them right on the meter. If we put them on the meter, then I'd be innovating in South Carolina right now. I'd be calling up a solar hot water heater installer. I'd be saying, please get to my house right away. Put on a solar hot water heater. It's not rocket science, you know, that's just some black pipes and heats my water and cuts my energy usage by about a third in my house. The reason I'm not doing that right now is it doesn't make any sense to. I mean, if I had the money to be altruistic, I don't. I got a kid in medical school. That one that told me that I need to clean up my act, he's in medical school. I got two in college, and believe you me, there is no money available to be altruistic and to call that solar hot water heater installer, right? I got to wait until the economics work. But when they work, I'm going to be calling. And it won't be that some government sedan rolled by and wrote me up and sent me a citation saying, you are not good, you're a bad person, you don't have a solar hot water heater on your roof. It'll rather be that, in my enlightened self-interest, I said, get with it, get one of those things on my roof. I'm now paying the real cost of electricity. And so far all I've mentioned is the health cost, right? And then if you add climate cost, you really start to see that, wow, let's innovate. Let's get away from these fuels that cause these negative externalities. Last thing I mentioned about this policy, and then open up for your questions and comments, is, you know, this may sound a little bit threatening in place of fossil fuel heaven of Texas, right? I mean, we got some fossil fuels here. But you've got a fossil fuel that is going to pretty quickly beat coal. In fact, it's already beating coal. Natural gas, of course. And, you know, I was on the radio one time to show you how strange things get and have gotten in this tribal identification. I was on the radio. Now, admittedly, it was an NPR station, you know, so those right-wingers of us, like my brother, says that that's communist radio. He monitors it. He listens to NPR just to see what the communists are thinking. Is on NPR in California. Oh, well, that's a double whammy. But I'm on there with this other conservative guy, and he says something about ExxonMobil being dishonorable. And I said, Marlo, come again on that. What's that? This is live radio. I said, what's that? ExxonMobil's dishonorable. He said, yeah. Rex Tillerson wants a carbon tax just so that natural gas can beat coal. And I said, Marlo, that's what we're for, isn't it? I mean, we free market conservatives are for putting all the cost in on the fuels. And if coal is stinky compared to natural gas, which is cleaner, all costs being in, isn't that what we believe? And aren't we happy if Rex Tillerson's going to make a lot of money? And of course, it was sort of garbled what he had to say in response. It didn't make any sense. Mostly what I was doing was listening very carefully, because immediately getting off the radio, I was emailing my friend at ExxonMobil saying, listen to this from 1905 until 2207 or something, the segment about the ExxonMobil being dishonorable, because I've been asking them for money over and over. They keep on turning me down, but I'm asking them anyway, because I want, and then later they came with the explanation, we cut him off from funding, and he's still sore with us. That's why he was saying that, because he had been part of the global warming is hooey thing. ExxonMobil had given him some money. They cut him off. He was sore about that. But the neat thing is that we do have some allies. We'd like for them to literally be allies. I'd like for Rex Tillerson and ExxonMobil to be on our side and say, yeah, Bob Inglis and the Energy and Enterprise Initiative are singing our song. I'm hoping for that. If any of you know him or somebody that can help me with that, let me know. But in the meantime, we are singing the same song because it's really great when human ingenuity gives us directional drilling and fracking that expands the supply of natural gas, driving down the price, making it so right now in South Carolina those 6 coal-fired plants are being converted to natural gas because of market forces. It's also true that there's a sort of a assumed cost that the EPA is going to do something on coal, and therefore that's factored in there as well. But there's this real strong market signal because of the expanded supply and the lower price of natural gas vis-a-vis coal, and the result is that good things are happening. Mrs. Jones is breathing better, and I'm going to come back with a question for you at the end of that. But let me see what questions or comments you've got about any of these things. Yes, ma'am.
One of the most difficult tasks associated with what you've been talking about, the tipping fee, is where do you initially set that fee?
Yeah.
And also how to make it flexible to market conditions and responsive to those, because a flat tax forever isn't going to always be the right driver for emissions reduction. So do you have any implementation plans to address those?
Yeah, we're a 501c3 organization, so we're not advocating a specific bill, but the bill I had in Congress is one that I really like, the Raise Wages, Cut Carbon Act of 2009, right? And so what that would have done is cut FICA taxes. Those are the payroll taxes that you pay on your first dollar of income. Your employer pays 6.2%, you pay 6.2%. It's 12.4%. It's a whopping tax on the first dollar of income. It's very regressive. So if you reduce that tax and then shift the tax, the same dollar for dollar tax swap, no growth of government, shift it onto CO2, then make it border adjustable. This is a key component of this. Make it so that the tax is removed on our exports and imposed on imports from countries that don't have a similar price on carbon. So that it's collected, the carbon tax is collected based on the content coming in. Now, there's an immediate WTO question there about whether that's okay. There's an argument, a good argument that it's not, but there's also a very good argument that it is. We think we can win it. If we do, we figure that China, within 24 hours, of it being upheld by the WTO, because they have an amazing way of reaching consensus, don't they? Within 24 hours, they will impose the same price on carbon internal to their economy. Reason? Why would you want to, if you're a Chinese industry importing Barbie dolls to Walmart shelves here in America, why would you want to remit taxes on entry to the United States to Washington when you could have remitted them to Beijing and then entered without any adjustment on the Barbie dolls? It's very important to get China in. If China isn't in, then this doesn't work. And maybe somebody will want to ask about the comparative advantage and how that we got to make it work for China. We're not out to hurt China here. We got to make it work for them. It's got to work for them. It's got to work for us, right? And now the dollar amount. That's I went through a bunch of things about border adjustment, which is important, and there's tax swap, because the tax that we're talking about is quite different than what, say, Henry Waxman. If he were here, he wouldn't mind me telling you he's a liberal from California. He's retiring now, but he's for a carbon tax that adds to government. We're for a carbon tax that has to be paid dollar for dollar with a cut in existing taxes. By the way, that's always been Al Gore's position too. Al Gore's always been for that kind of revenue-neutral tax swap, which is interesting that, anyway, we'll go into that if you want to, which gives me some hope, that, hey, if we have left-right agreement on that and both are getting something that they want, maybe there's a way forward here. In normal times, you would think so. Anyway, so the dollar amount, what price to put on it? Here's what the economists would tell us, I think, is you want to price carbon at the marginal harm that the next ton of CO2 released is going to cause. You don't want to go back and pay for past sins, because that'd create economic inefficiencies. Although it might be, from ethicist point of view, there might be something to be said. But from the economist point of view, you'd say you want to price it right at the marginal harm. Now, what is that? We asked the economists, and that's where Harry Truman comes in. I wish I had a one-armed economist, because they'll say on the one hand, on the other hand. And so the economists would be all over the board about what that should be, what that price should be, right? The thing that's hard, and this is where it becomes rather an ethical question, if you do standard economics and you value the lives of our great-great-grandchildren, and you discount that under typical interest rate assumptions, you get to a value of about $3.56 on your great-great-great-grandchild's life, which, raises some ethical questions about whether you feel comfortable with saying that, hey, your great-great-great-grandchild is worth $3.56. But what we're saying, if we could get through the denial and into the big debate about what that price should be, we'd be ecstatic. We have a big debate about what the price should be. Most people are talking about a $25 per ton carbon tax. That would cause gasoline to go up by 25 cents a gallon. It would cause electricity to rise by 1 to 2 cents per kilowatt hour. So it's a hit to the family budget. It's not catastrophic, but if you do it the way that we want to do it, it's accompanied by a bigger paycheck, because we've backed off of some form of taxation of income. So you got money in your pocket to innovate, but you're paying the true cost of that electricity, and you're dialing the solar hot water heater installer, and you got money to pay him because you got a tax cut. Is that more than you ever want to know? Yes, sir.
Yeah, so you mentioned that you want to have transparency. So when you go to the gas pump, it says 25 cents of this gallon of gasoline is going to cover that. My sense is that that's actually not what people want. People are outraged. They would much rather pay a little more on their health care, completely on transparency, a little more on national defense, because we have to have 2 carrier battle groups going to the Gulf. But that's actually what people want. And I understand economists, it's this disconnect between what the economists say is the right thing to do and what people actually want. I mean, have you ever run into that?
Yeah, well, I think they're onto something. I mean, yeah. I mean, I'm not an economist and I'm not a scientist either, so it's sort of strange that I'm holding forth about both topics. But that's what politicians usually do. Even recovering politicians apparently talk about things they don't know anything about, right? But anyway, so I'd say this: the economist. I believe I'm right about this. A lot of economists are people who believe that we are totally rational beings, and that we make decisions to maximize our economic well-being, and that we really do study prices and things like that. I think there is some truth to that, but it's not the whole truth, I think, is what you're pointing out. Because to some extent, we really are like the little kid that says, you know, you can't see me, I'm hiding, you know, and it's sort of like we don't want to know what the real price of gasoline is. We sort of want to just believe that it's $3.29 that I paid recently, right? It's way higher than that. If you do some simple cost accounting about the protection of the supply line coming out of the Straits of Hormuz, it's way higher than $3.29. But maybe we don't want to know. Maybe you're right. What do y'all think? Do you think we want to know, or do you think we want to just sort of keep on? I hide and you can't see me. All these hidden costs. You can't see me. Or do we want to be full citizens and say, no, really, I want to know. I want to know what this is costing.
It'd be good for it to be transparent, but man, you go to fill up your gas tank and it's, you know, $200 to fill up. That's painful.
Yeah. Well, again, it's $25 a ton. It would turn into 25 cents per gallon. So
That would be terrible.
it'd be, you know, 10 gallons is $2.50. But presumably you got money in your pocket. But still, there is some sticker shock about that, right? And by the way, the mechanics that I think make sense is an upstream application of the carbon tax rather than downstream, so that I wouldn't see it at the pump necessarily. I would see it.
Marlo Lewis would tell everybody.
Yeah, Marlo would tell
He
everybody.
would tell people. See, people would know how much they're paying.
See, now you've outed Marlo. I was just calling Marlo, but now you got Marlo Lewis's last name. But he's the guy on the radio with me. But anyway, so what I would think would be easiest to apply the tax at the mine and at the pipeline, because there are only about 2,000 companies that do those things, have mines and have pipelines, and so it'd be about 2,000 taxpayers. It'd be a very small addition to the task of the IRS. I mean, they'd get to know all the names of those people. It'd be easy for the IRS to do it that way. Now, if you did it downstream, there are a lot of points of sale, and it gets pretty complicated administratively. But just unlike Waxman and Markey, who went to the House floor and said cap and trade ain't going to rise, isn't going to cause energy prices to go up, I don't know why they said that. That's the whole point of cap and trade. It's the whole point of what I'm talking about, is to make it rise to the true cost. So we no longer do this, I hide and you can't see me, that we're like real citizens. I mean, full adults who can see prices and act hopefully somewhat rationally. What do you think? Do you think we're rational, or do you think we're, do we want to know, or do we not want to know what it really costs? What do you think? I don't want to know. Yeah, the way here on the plane, I was reading a review of Jonathan Haidt's book. I haven't read his book, but the Righteous Mind. You're familiar? Really interesting stuff he writes about how he counters this economist view. I think this is a dominant economist view, you know, that we're all rational. He says, nothing doing, we are not. That we form opinions based on shared beliefs and deeply held thoughts, and that then we go out and rationally try to back those up with arguments. So, I mean, big contest there, I guess.
I do think, though, that, you know, people listen to the politicians, they listen to the leaders, and so if enough people in Congress started saying, look, you know, we need to do this, people would sort of accept it. But right now, it's just it's just not an environment where people want transparency. But
Yeah.
I think you could convince people.
Well, in fact, you and I might have heard at the same place when we were out at Google. Ed Maybach was talking about some of his research that shows that leading elites really do matter in forming public opinion. You're right. If members of Congress would say, listen, we got a serious problem, let's deal with it, that works. But it's also true that I would point out that most members of Congress are scared to death of you. They're just frightened by their people. And so, and for good reason, because, you know, if you cross one of these tribal orthodoxies, you get 29% of the vote in a Republican primary. And so better just to say, you know, you're exactly right. You earned all of that Social Security money. I know you're 85, and I know you've been collecting since 65, but you're right. You have yet to get out of Social Security all you paid in, which would be completely bogus. They long ago got out more out of Social Security than they ever paid in. You, however, are not going to be in that deal. You are going to pay in more than you get out. But I had the conversation with my 90-year-old dad's 85-year-old friend a month or so ago, and he wasn't hearing any of it. My dad, thankfully, is this wonderful retired industrial engineer. He's done the numbers, and he knows that he got more out of Social Security than he ever paid in. But his friend could not receive it. It's information he just could not receive. And so it goes to this question about whether, are we rational people that can hear information, or are we like my friend David, or my dad's friend David, who just couldn't get it? But anyway, you had a question back here. Yeah.
Yeah, along that same vein, it seems a little bit like we're putting the cart before the horse, because step one is convincing a lot of folks in Congress, I'm sure you can attest to this, that the science is real, that the science is legit, and that it's not just some coalition of thousands of people over several decades who are trying to steal money. What would you say would be a good idea to sort of educate folks? Because you said it took going to Antarctica to really see the science firsthand.
Yeah.
Change your mind.
Yeah, big carbon footprint in that, getting everybody to Antarctica, right? But maybe we could do it here at Texas A&M or something. Get them here and sit them down in this lecture that you do. Well, you know, it's this is I think there's a limit to science on this. Actually, it is the science and the economics. Economics are really clear, and it's like Art Laffer says. If you go to our website, Art Laffer will say on there, he doesn't know whether climate change is real or not, but he says he doesn't need to know. This is Ronald Reagan's economics advisor. He says all he knows is you're taxing something you want more of, which is income, and you're not taxing something you maybe want less of, which is emissions. He says, change what you tax. It is a no-brainer. Ronald Reagan's economics advisor, right? Economics, once you get in the head, it's pretty clear. The science is pretty clear, too. I mean, that's, I guess, what you show in your lecture, is that, gee, it's pretty clear. Now, by the way, we don't say, the Energy and Enterprise Initiative, that the science is settled. Because, in fact, as I understand it, science is never settled. It's always in flux. So right now, there's some people challenging Einstein on E equals mc squared. Do not ask me to explain that. I have no idea what it means. But there's some people that think that he got it a little bit wrong. And they want to improve upon it because of the joy of science and discovery, but also a little bit of pride is, can you imagine if you improve upon Albert Einstein? They're going to name it for you. I mean, it's going to have your name on the theory. And so science is always being challenged. And it may turn out that the models you can pick on these models at any point and start pulling things apart. But what they pretty clearly in the main indicate is there's risk. And if you're on the political left in here, would you do me a favor, if you're ever talking to the people we're trying to reach, which are people on the political right, please don't talk to them about New York City going blah, 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 blah. Because you know what? It drives conservatives batty when you come to them with that. Because they don't want to hear those apocalyptic visions. Because if you tell me that the apocalypse is upon me and I can't do anything about it, well, I think denial is a pretty good coping mechanism, right? I mean, so tell me, rather this, if you're talking to my folks, people we're trying to reach, tell them, listen, reasonable risk avoidance. And maybe cite this number, this factoid to them. All the insurance companies are basing premium on increased storm intensity. And and that's because their actuaries are listening very closely to the scientists. If you're the CEO of one of those insurance companies and you think that, no, this climate change really is hooey, you could order your actuaries to put a 0 in those columns. And you could undercut the entire market right now and pick up a great big book of business. But isn't it interesting that nobody's doing that? Because they plan on keeping that business in business. And so their actuaries are putting real numbers in those columns. And that's how they're pricing the risk. So you talk to, Al Gore can talk to his people and get them all ginned up by talking to them about, the apocalypse that is immediately upon us. It doesn't work on the folks that I used to represent. They need to hear from insurance people about reasonable risk avoidance. And then they can grasp it, and they can figure that I can do something about this. But mostly, I would say this, it's not that members of Congress, if they understood the science or the economics, it's that they really still have the need to hear from you. You're way more powerful than you may imagine. And your influence over your member of Congress is actually huge. They really do care what you think. Most of us go around saying, no, Congress doesn't listen to me. Actually, they listen very carefully, particularly in the primary situation. They really want to avoid losing in a primary. Because losing in a primary is a little like getting divorced. Somebody who used to hug you around the neck at the county party convention, tell you they love you, they're praying for you. Next time you go to the county convention, they got the other guy's sticker on them. What? You said you loved me. Now you don't love me anymore. It hurts. And so on the left and the right, people slam themselves up on the wall. So there's no real estate over there. There's no daylight on a Republican's right or a Democrat's left. The result is the country is ill-served because most of you are probably out here thinking, can't we get some solutions here? Well, no, because they're slammed up on that wall and they're on that wall. It's like a middle school dance, You had to have the teachers pull the boys off that wall, the girls off that wall, and make them dance. Then you could have a dance at middle school. Well, yes, sir.
So I'm wondering if you're getting any more acceptance of your ideas based on the fact that the EPA is currently in the process of rolling out a bunch of regulations on climate change. And so to some extent, you could go to the Republicans and say, listen, we can either do it an efficient way, which would be your way, or we can do it, or we can let the EPA do it. But they're going to do it anyway because the Supreme Court basically told them they had to. So, I mean, has that gotten any resonance?
Yeah, terrific. Yeah, that's exactly. We do use that, and it is effective. Everybody understands what he's saying. President Obama is acting now. If he were here, he'd say, "Listen, I got to act because the Supreme Court has ordered us. If we make an endangerment finding under the Clean Air Act, the EPA must act." And so he'd say, "Listen, I got no choice. I got to act." And of course, he wants to act. But what we would say to him is, "Sir, you're getting ready to go into a box that is going to make America the double loser, because you are going to price carbon through regulations. That is the most ineffective, clumsy way to do it. And the result is it's going to be domestic only, too. China will not be in on that gig. And since it's not, some energy-intensive industries here in Texas will pick up and move to China. If we put electricity, for example, at its actual cost, true cost, all cost in, no more hiding, then some of those industries will pick up and leave. Now, so we lose jobs, but we also get increased global emissions because China has greater energy intensity than we do. And so, therefore, we're the double loser if it goes that way. So what we'd say is there's a better way. You got to get China in. That's what this border adjustment's about. And price it with a price signal. Don't price it through clumsy regulation. And as I say, the neat thing is that that's something that not just people that I'm trying to reach, which is conservatives, would seem to get and understand. It's also something that people like Al Gore clearly get and understand and wants to do. Yes, sir? Oh, no. Yeah.
I like the carbon tax idea, but you mentioned 25 cents a gallon. We've been through the fluctuations for the last 5 years. I mean, a cent or two in electricity, we've been through that.
Yeah.
It hasn't changed very much. So you're really lowballing it to make it palatable. So
yeah, interesting.
The real cost might be double the price of gas now, 25 cents.
Yeah, good point. And I didn't answer the other question you had too, which reminds me, is that you got to have that increasing carbon tax, right? Because what you're going to get is, and Art Laffer explains this on our website if you want to hear this 1 hour version, not the 2-minute version that's on our website. But search around on there, you'll find his 1 hour where Art goes into this thing to explain the substitution effect and how it is that when I put that solar hot water heater on my roof, I'm reducing electricity demand. I'm moving away from the price hurt that I'm getting. I'm moving away from. Well, as I move away and put that solar hot water heater on my roof, the government's revenues decline. Well, this FICA tax, the one that you're paying 6.2 and your employer's paying 6.2, that funds Social Security. So if that's going down as I put that solar hot water heater on my roof, you got to have the tax going up so that you basically get stable government revenues. That drives, so it's part of the answer to your question is that it may start at 25, but it's going to be going up. But then that's not the whole of your answer, because the rest of it is, you're right, 25 cents is not a very strong price signal. If you're concerned about this mostly for national security reasons, like Charles Krautheimer, for example, he would mind me saying a neocon, somebody who's very concerned about projecting American power and sort of rearranging things the way that we think they should be. Charles Krautheimer thinks it should be $1 per gallon tax on gasoline. And he was as crazy as I was. He wrote that in 2009 when I introduced my bill. He was on the cover of National Review, a conservative magazine, arguing for a gas tax of $1 per gallon. Totally for national security reasons. He says that you got to keep the price of gas, you got to force it up and hold it up. And yes, his would be flexible based on, it's a very interesting idea that Krautheimer has about making sure that the price of gasoline never loses this dollar premium we put on it. Because he thinks that dollar will make the alternatives really work. It'll make, for example, compressed natural gas more attractive. And basically break the strategic significance of oil, which if you're a neocon like Charles Krautheimer, you really want to do that because you want to break the power of Middle Eastern oil. And that, so yeah, it's a good argument. We're happy to hear the argument. No, hit it harder.
You're going to use the lobster and a pot. You're going to create it slowly that people don't notice it. People will figure that out and say no ballin'.
Yeah.
You can't increase it too much, or else you're going to force some of the people who are in poverty into worse, probably poverty that may have to spend more of their income on gasoline and less on other things.
Yeah, and what I used to say when I was in Congress is how high you want to go. My answer a couple years ago would have been how high you want to go. I'll go as high as you want. Because as long as you give me a corresponding tax cut on income, let's go. So you want to eliminate the FICA tax? Great. Carbon tax just went up. You want to eliminate some corporate income taxes? I'm for that. Let's go up on the carbon tax. But Michael Boskin, another one of Reagan's advisors, told me, though, watch that carefully because you've got to make sure you hold at the marginal harm. You don't want to go higher than the marginal harm. Because if you do, then you start getting economic inefficiencies. And his example was congestion taxes in New York City. You could eliminate all cars in Manhattan by charging, say, $1,000 per car to enter Manhattan. But you would destroy economic activity. So the marginal harm can't be $1,000. It's less than that. So if you want to charge maybe $20 to enter Manhattan, that might reduce congestion but not kill the economic engine. So, but again, back to that question about whether if we get through the denial and into the debate, I'm for it. Let's have a big debate about what the price should be and how high it should be and what taxes should be cut.
We should probably wrap up about a minute. So does anybody have any pressing questions?
Last word.
Get through denial with both parties.
Yeah.
Wouldn't it be political suicide for the dominant party? As people drive up to the pump and we see, oh, this party passed this bill that charges us an extra 50 cents on gas. And it's delayed gratification doesn't exist for most people from my experience.
Yeah, well, it is a risk. I agree with that. But here's what I wish had happened, and I think it would tell me whether you think this would have been powerful. If Barack Obama had called me and asked me about his State of the Union address beforehand, he didn't. But if he had, I don't know why he didn't call and ask for my advice, but when he said, climate change is a fact, he didn't help us at all. In fact, what he was doing there was politics about 2014 midterm elections. That had nothing to do with climate change. Because if he really wanted to move the needle on climate change, this is what I would have written in that speech for him. There's real risk, and then he would have turned to, in my speech, he would have turned to John Boehner and he would have said, John, I got a deal for you. We and all my friends here on this side of the chamber are ready to vote to tax carbon dioxide. You, John, choose the corresponding tax cut. Deal? Shake on it with John. I mean, that's power, right? I mean, that's if he really wanted to shake things up. Offer that deal. It's a lot of risk for Barack Obama to do that. But what's Boehner to say? No, we don't want to cut corporate income taxes. No, we don't want to cut income taxes. No, we can't do that. What? Boehner's going to say, of course. This is what I learned one time. Kevin Hassett, economist, Republican economist, small group, some conservatives, more progressives. He says to him, got a deal for you. We'll price carbon, and I, Kevin Hassett, get to choose the corresponding tax cut. Deal? Some of the progressives start going like this, and he says, why not? They said, because you'll cut the corporate income tax. And he says, that's precisely what I would do. He says, so how worried are you about climate change? It's a real gut check for you, isn't it? He said, if you think it's really the danger you say it is, let me cut corporate income taxes. Now, of course, if you're a Democrat, by the way, if you're on that side of that chamber that Barack Obama is addressing, let John do that. Cut the corporate income tax. Talk about the risk. I mean, the risk Barack Obama is taking at that point is now you're going to notice at the pump, no longer EI hiding. But the risk for Boehner is that he just cut corporate income taxes on Rex Tillerson and Exxon Mobil and not on Mrs. Jones. And so now, if you're on that side of the chamber as Barack Obama is addressing it, you got a political issue, and the people on this side got a political. So, in other words, when things get done, they're done with risk. I mean, if you want to slam yourself up on the wall, it's totally safe. It's just nothing good happens for the country. The country prospers when people take some risk and open up some real estate on their right and on their left and say, listen, we're going to find a solution. We're going to dance here at the middle school dance. So thank you for letting me come dance with you, and appreciate your questions.